Welcome to AC Zooming, and here the project Here, There, and Everywhere, which we are. And this is our first Zooming art project. George Emilio Sanchez will be doing new text reading. He's an artist and an activist, and thank you, George.
Thank you to Holly, Sonia, and Sabrina from AC Institute for the invitation. This is really, really great. I don't want to say too much. I started to write this about 3 weeks ago. So I didn't expect to be doing this, but I started to write things that were very much speaking to the moment here in New York City around the pandemic. And it's the first time I just finished writing it today. A little crazy to do this, but it's crazy times, so what the hell. So thank you, everybody. I don't know who's there. I don't want to see you because it'll distract me horrendously. So thank you, everybody. The piece is called Chronicle of an Invisible Enemy First Told. It is immeasurable how deeply my life and experience has been straitjacketed by the term invisible enemy. From birth to the present, I can acutely recall how I have been haunted by this concept of an unknown, unnamed presence, either in people, concepts, or both, that work against me. They're not an ally, as I have been targeted by invisible enemies for the majority of my life. But I keep hold on to my sanity by the mere and profound fact that this is not just about me, hardly. Because of my meager sense of history, my individual search for identity, as a brown-skinned Latino born to Ecuadorian immigrants who ran away from their destiny to find mine, the invisible I first came to know in my early years remains in the shadows by my side constantly. This chronicle is testimony to elements, to cores of my life that unknowingly have intersected with people and with histories across the span of time, across geographies, and the experience of understanding how believing is seeing what is not there, but what is right here. Look, you see? COVID-19 has and is wreaking havoc in a place where normal was never good enough. The invisible enemy has infected thousands upon thousands, taken the lives of thousands upon thousands, and the social life we once lived is now on hold, held captive by the threat of human contact. Daily, hourly reports from elected officials have replaced the soap operas of Monday to Friday popular culture, while the back and forth between fact and fiction is the new game on the national news that may result in drawing a line between life and death. Heart attacks are reported to be at an all-time low, while domestic violence is off the charts of acceptability. The open society of the US, so-called open society, has been replaced by what looks like a Muslim-like environment in the public spaces, everybody wearing masks. A mere glance, walking by a pedestrian, has become a potential threat as people navigate their sidewalks in a silent choreography where keeping 6 feet apart is the only aesthetic direction everyone moves by. Solitude and isolation are the new normal, and shelter in place has lowered pollution levels in major urban centers globally. The capitalism of this republic resembles socialist countries that exist elsewhere as government checks are delivered to individuals and businesses alike. The invisible hand that Adam Smith wrote about has never shook so many hands. Occupy Wall Street gave birth to the term the 1%, and now COVID has awakened the world up to the label of essential workers. Another concept of labor that butts against the corporate obsession of people like the current occupier of the Oval Office. A side effect of COVID-19 is the daily exposure of a president of a first world nation who habitually refutes science and medical facts and exploits these factual lies as evidence of a brilliant leader and someone who is somehow permitted, allowed, and protected by the Constitution, no less, to repeat this charade, actually this harm, until one day he won't. Homeschooling is the new public education as families are mandated to live and work and study 24/7. So now in New York City, all the children have discovered they know much more about math than their parents do. On many streets in communities throughout the 5 boroughs, where the neighbors come out of their lockdown and spill onto their stoops like they just did a few minutes ago to give thanks to the hospital workers and the first responders with hoops, hollers, people banging pots and pans, ringing bells, and giving a standing ovation and applauding the essential workers whose lives are saving lives every day since the invisible enemy arrived on our shores. A new addition to many of the local hospitals in New York City are the refrigerated trailers that are stationed out front, and they are placed there to store the deceased bodies of COVID-19 fatalities, waiting to be picked up by overworked mortuary services where the supply and demand are at mortal odds. And every day at 7, when I join my neighbors and I celebrate the hospital workers, I can never erase or blot out the essential reality of those refrigerated trailers, storing the COVID fatalities who died alone. And it's that fact alone, dying all alone, literally and figuratively, chills me to the bones, no pun intended, of my bodily experience. This week, more people will have been killed by this invisible enemy than all the people who died fighting the Vietnam War, all the US fatalities. 58,000 people died in that war, and we surpassed that number this week in this country. One of those who died was a survivor of COVID-19, who then took her own life. She committed suicide, a 49-year-old doctor who was the head doctor of the ER at New York Presbyterian Hospital in Upper Manhattan, Dr. Lorraine Breen. We could only surmise by the tribute of her father that her experiencing of witnessing the number of deaths, witnessing how they died, it was just too much to take. This invisible enemy provokes the question, how much can any one of us take? How much can we endure? How much can we live with when so many invisible enemies are revealed to live in the air, infecting our bodies, our minds, our souls, our lives, our public spaces, our world dilemmas, our lust for life? And a growing trend of this and the potential drama that adds to the noise that we're surrounded by is this notion of the federal government versus state governments, this conflict. While people are dying, while people are getting infected, families traumatized and frayed, the normal that was once good enough for some people has been relegated to partisan mindsets who are set upon to exploit one thing over another. And that specific construct of production over existence, profit over labor, money over human matter, fuels a narrative that undercuts anything one might refer to, dare I say, facts. Facts are real as one who comes from a long lineage of never good enough. I can shout from the mountaintop, we have many mountains to climb, beginning with how sheltering in place is how we'll survive, but it comes at a cost. What is at stake? Who are we as people? How do we care for the ailing and the soon to be ailing? How do we address the inequities of access to health resources, to hospitals, to doctors, to protective wear? How do we look after people? What is health? Is it the absence of illness? What is the health of a nation? Is it the absence of non-whites? Key food on Myrtle Avenue in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. Thursday morning, April 9th. The first radio and newspaper reports that I hear and read address how the highest ratio of deaths of COVID-19 are found among the brown and black communities here in New York City. Okay, no real surprise, right? But another reminder of how normal was never good enough. 7:07 a.m., I arrive at my local Key Food outlet to get my groceries for the next 10 days or so. My strategy since the inception of COVID lockdown has been to get to Key Food first thing in the morning before most people wake up, do my shopping, and get out of there before it gets crowded. That's what I've been doing. Before April 9th, I breezed right into my Key Food with fewer than 10 other fellow geniuses, okay? But Thursday, April 9th, it all changed. Now the store had adopted a new policy that only allowed 10 people inside at any one time. So as a result, now there was a line of shoppers waiting to get inside. Waiting to get inside. Story of my life. Okay, by the time I was the next in line to go inside, there was nothing but brown and black folk in line behind me. And then out of nowhere, or from the street, I see a 6'2", middle-aged white man, not wearing a mask, not wearing gloves, appear right in front of me. And as he looks up from his phone, he sees that the automatic door of the market is closed. And he looks to me and he says, "Are they closed?" No, they're open, but you have to get in line. No reply. He looks back at his phone, pauses. He glances up to look at the door again, and then he scurries inside before the store employee could catch him. "Yo, wait a second, man, he cut," and I see the store employee come back. I said, "No, he cut in line. And the store employee's like, I know, man, I know, what am I gonna do? Go ahead, you're next, go ahead." So as I walk into the market, I could hear in my head the radar reports coming from WNYC saying 35% of COVID deaths in New York City are Latinx people. And I couldn't believe WNYC actually said Latinx people. And then he says 30% are black. And these reports are in my head, going through my brown body and my brown mind. And although this is not news to me, it still ignites the racial lens of walking through this world. And today, walking through COVID world that is wreaking havoc on black and brown bodies in white, and this white middle-aged male without mask, no gloves, decided to just walk out into the COVID epicenter with no protection, a living, breathing vehicle of infection. And it hits me. A white man infecting black and brown bodies. Oh shit, when did that ever happen? I know my brown people have a history of becoming infected by white people accidentally or intentionally. Oh, from centuries, all the way back that go back from there to now. But no. Then I'm seeing, like I said, no, not now, not in my face, not in the faces of the black and brown people who were wearing masks and gloves to protect us from the infection, from the virus, the invisible enemy that has suddenly become visible. And waiting in line on Myrtle Avenue in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, I think to myself, no way, this ain't gonna happen. So I immediately, when I walk in, I scan the aisles, okay? This took a matter of seconds. And I can still hear the WNYC report in my head, 35%, 30%. And I spot the trespasser, okay? He's over to the right, and he has a black handbasket in his hand. And he's going down the pasta aisle. I know every aisle, okay? He goes down the pasta aisle, and I briskly make my way over to the pasta aisle, and he doesn't see me approaching. And before this guy could say rigatoni, I come right up to him and I say, "You know, there's a reason why there's a line outside to get in. I don't have to wait, okay? I don't have to wait. I'm disabled." Well, you should have said that. Your mouth is obviously not disabled. You should have just said something. I knew this guy was lying, okay? I knew it. How did I know it? Well, because at my college, I work a lot with disability students, and they would never lie, and they wouldn't cut in line. And if they did, they would say, "Hey, can I cut in line?" And I would say, "Yeah, sure, of course, go right ahead." Second, what I really wanted to say to the trespasser, I didn't, but what I wanted to say was, who do you think you are that your needs are more important than any of the brown and black people that are in line? And you have the fucking arrogance to think you don't need a mask, you don't need gloves, because if I were some conspiracy theorist, I might think you were paid to go out among black and brown communities and infect us, many of us, as many as possible, to add to the colonialist statistics, tabulating, recording, documenting the real and the obvious. What historically, at least for centuries, has existed. How one race will survive pandemics, hurricanes, earthquakes, acts of God, and settler colonialism. And it ain't the people you cut in front of. And to be perfectly honest, because I'll never see you again, I knew your disability the moment I saw you with no mask, no gloves, a lone 6'2", middle-aged white male. COVID rumination number 1. What happens to freedom of assembly, freedom to redress grievances, free speech, when a society is in lockdown and 6 feet apart results in sheltering in place, and we are not allowed to share public space or private spaces, as we did up until mid-March 2020. All the houses, the spaces, the venues that present the multitude of voices, the concerts, the recitals, the live programs of music, dance, theater, all the embodiments of a living will of free speech. When they are not permitted to serve their purpose and their mission, what are we to make of this moment? When our cultural bloodstreams of public free speech are cut off, how do we prosper from this new unimagined opportunity to carve out the sublimated drive to coexist in a free and just place where pandemics do not frolic in communities of color, while we are told daily, it's up to the states to save your ass? Make America Great Again in 2020 ricochets with prophetic echoes of what has been made, where is the great, and what the hell is again referring to. People, let me tell you, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land, and it's not pretty. I'm sorry to tell you this. As I reached the crest of the promised land, I saw the back of MLK Jr. walking ahead of me, but he was walking since April 3rd, 1968, walking it right into a white void that some might call negative space. And I saw what he saw, a blank space that people call the promised land. But this land in front of me, this space, this mindset was blank. And yet this notion of a blank space, the tabula rasa I was taught in school, was nothing more than the propaganda of colonized agendas to indoctrinate the blank consciousness of a new nation to behold, embrace, embody a nationalism that was determined, was blind to the fact that the blank space was only a notion by which to take what was not theirs from those they could not see. And so, in the midst of a pandemic vision quest, I happened to look behind me as I arrived in the promised land, and what did I see? A mountain of skulls filling the horizon, empty eye sockets pulsing in shards of light. I step into, closing my eyes, first blinding light emanating from the seeming emptiness. Opening my eyes, on the other side, I see creatures with 2, 3, 4 legs, part this, part that, human bodies, animal heads, animal bodies, human heads, temples of stone and sand towering towards the sun. A shining ocean teeming with motion and songs floating from the sizzling foam upwards to mix and mingle with the souls of ancestors whose eyes glisten in the darkness that pours out heat and light while everyone is in a circular dance, holding hands, bowed heads, praying silently as the sun and moon rotate in 20-minute cycles of light to dark to light again, and memories walk freely here to there, never bothering to be held or grasped or even named, just breathing in the moment of exaltation comfortable with being thought of. No obligations or remedies to offer, as a chorus singing, unseen, proclaims acceptance is forgiveness. As white doves follow black hawks across a span of time and space that never met before until now. Hello, space. Hello, time. Walk with me to the promised land of nothing there, nothing here, nothing now and forevermore. Life everlasting, beyond death is a lie, lasting until life becomes a was, but is never, evermore, more like you, more like me, here right now, here today, 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 today. Nowhere, now here. Nowhere, now here. Nowhere. This entry contains, this entry contains the ashes fallen from the sky above as the black smoke emanating from the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn hovers overhead for a wisp of a moment and lingers for years as the lived moments of unnamed souls transform and mix with the air we breathe, and we absorb the hopes, the lost wishes of the anonymous, the silenced minority of those who succumb to an invisible enemy that most refer to as a virus, COVID-19 to be exact. And without a moment to think, a lightning bolt charged with the cumulative lore of generations jolts my memories that were locked away in a no, not me. And I recognize instantly the trauma of contemporaneous dimensions masked as an indigenous world. And what I was taught was strange and unfamiliar is in fact, or has become, the strangely familiar reality whose centuries of lies, erasure, and outright misrepresentation appear in fullness. And I see a mirror reflecting what I've never been able to acknowledge. And that is why and how my brown skin is skin. Nothing more, nothing less. The skin of civilizations, religions, belief systems that spawned the genesis of the power of zero and the mathematics whose quotient multiplied exponentially carves up and down, uplifting the asymptote of electrical currents, flashing against the black hole of Western imagination that I once embraced by seeing a brown-skinned boy in the mirror who wanted to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed. This brings me front and center to the notion of invisible enemy. In every conceivable aspect, as seen through my lens, every invisible enemy I conceive of represents a type of virus that in one form or another infects the minds and bodies of countless multitudes. And those infections mask what we've been indoctrinated to understand are the staples of our existence. Like, how often have you remarked to yourself while looking at a map of the United States showing the impact of COVID-19 across the country, that you recognize you are viewing a settler colonialist paradigm of this landmass that once belonged to Indian country? It took me literally 2 decades to put 2 and 2 together and realize every single map of the US is a dream come true for Europeans and the early colonists, but not so for any nation in Indian country. And just to be clear and upfront, when I say Indian country, that's how every Indian scholar, artist, poet, thinker refers to the amalgamation of tribal natives in the US, Indian country. Like today, Saturday, the New York Times had a headline that read, Native American tribes, not Indian, sue US over delay in $8 billion in aid. Again, is it really any surprise how the report states that the pandemic has been devastating, more devastating against the tribe than any other group across the entire US. Now remember, I asked before, how much can a people take? How many pandemics have indigenous, natives, Indians, tribes had to endure? How many pandemics, here are two invisible enemies straddling life and death, and they trace where COVID ends and where settler colonialism begins, or the other way around. Some may or may not recognize the ins and outs of history, whether it was the smallpox blankets distributed by the US Cavalry, or the litany of Supreme Court decisions for over 200 years that can be summed up by the doctrine of discovery, which legally proclaims the land belongs to the conquerors. So back to the map. All those state lines marking the 48 states of the continental US cannot be seen whenever you fly overhead from here to there. Those lines identifying state boundaries are a type of legal fiction. They're not really real. Unlike the pain and the trauma of the indigenous, the natives, the savages, the Indians, that what they've experienced and who were here long before time began, long before the Mayflower landed and was able to call out, land ho. COVID-19 rumination number 2. We have been here before. Not the we of we the people, but the we of never good enough. A pandemic is not new, nor will it be the last. Dust to dust and eye to eye, day by day, moontide by moontide, sunrise to sunset. The times, they are ablazing. As the search for a vaccine for COVID-19 continues, the question remains, when will we find a vaccine for the invisible enemy that continues to allow people to believe what they see, lines on a map, and not see what is hidden by those lines? Decolonization is not a metaphor. Facts are real. Believing is seeing what is not there, but what is right here. Look up. Open your eyes. See? Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you.